Today's program is part of a special series brought to you by St. Agnes Medical Center and Every Neighborhood Partnership, with funding provided by ACEs Aware. Together, we are working to raise awareness about the effects of adverse childhood experiences in hopes of building a healthier community and a brighter future for our children. Dr. B explains the importance of acknowledging our stressors of the past in order to thrive in the present. Plus, she shares practical tips for coping through challenging times and building greater resiliency so you and your family can enjoy healthier and more fulfilling life.
Hi, you're listening to Delusional Optimism with Dr. B,
where we explore human resiliency
and learn how people thrive even after adversity.
We break down the complexities of the human brain so concepts are simple and relatable.
It's fun and empowering to understand how your earliest experiences
influence your relationships today.
What makes you tick?
Dr. B is a speaker, trainer, and consultant who understands emotions and human development from the inside out.
Let's dive into today's episode.
Here's Dr. B.
Hi, everybody. This is Dr. B, and I'm with my co-host facilitator, Seth Creekmore. Today, we're going to be talking about Threenagers, Fournadoes, and Fivers, and sort of the developmental stages of, how do you understand this period of life, and how do we parent them for resilience and for our own sanity as well as theirs? If you're interested in furthering this conversation, please email me at contact@drbconnections.com. Or if you just want to know more about me, go to my website at www.drbconnections.com. All right, let's get started.
Well, good afternoon, Dr. B. How are you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well, thank you.
Doing well.
Yes.
Nice. Any crazy weekend plans?
Crazy weekend plans. No, I wish I could say yes. It's beautiful blue sky though, so it stopped raining. Awesome. So probably a few beautiful walks maybe, but other than that,
that's great.
Yeah, nothing yet.
That's awesome. In Indiana, we're supposed to get a polar vortex.
Oh.
So like sub-zero temperatures this week. So that'll be fun.
Does that mean snow too, or is
we probably have, let's see. We probably have like a good 6-7 inches right now.
Oh, so nice. Okay, so truth be told, I'm a Californian. We don't get snow where I live, but we are going to the snow the following weekend for like several days. And working from a little bit of a snow area. It's still near where we live, but it's up because we need some snow.
Yes, the change in season it's so great. I don't know if I can live somewhere where there isn't seasons personally.
Yeah,
but
it's freezing. It's freezing.
Yeah, well, yes.
I'm so ready for this change of season, even though it doesn't include snow. I'm like, I need spring and summer.
My goodness.
But yeah.
Awesome. So we're talking about 3, 4s, and 5s, and you have unique and funky little names.
Yes.
Can you explain how you came up with those?
Okay, so Threenager is not my word. It is a word that was just sort of, I don't know where it came out of, but it really hit home when we had a Threenager in our family, my darling granddaughter, Charlie. You realize, wow, they just have a lot going on emotionally inside them. And so I've met lots of parents in my career in life who are so surprised at the intensity of a 3-year-old. And, we kind of expect that from toddlers, 2-year-olds, the quote unquote terrible 2s. I like to call them terrific 2s. But
terrific, yes.
But what people are not prepared for is the Threenager and the Threenager's attitude, and I won't call it an inability, but it is sort of an inability or a learning curve of managing their emotions in this next phase of life. So that's the Threenager. And then there's the Fournado, which is then you think, oh yeah, it'll happen when they're 4. And almost sometimes what happens is it gets even more intense. And parents are not expecting it and don't really know what to do with this intensity. And then they become 5ers. And 5ers are a little bit more mellow, we start to see the shift again. And so I kind of wanted to talk to them and talk about these ages in a cluster because they are all related to each other. And if you can recognize the signs, then you don't feel so off track or, lost in the woods. So,
yeah. Is there a reason why, so Threenagers is supposed to sound like teenager? Is there something correlating there?
Yes, because if anybody's raised a teenager and you know how sassy and opinionated and, I want to say, I don't want to offend teenagers, but, their maturity is still coming online. And so, and development does repeat itself. So what we do know about this toddler, 3, 4, 5's period of life in early childhood actually repeats itself in preteen, early teen ages. And so we can use this period of time not only to set the stage for the second go around when kids are teenagers, early teens, but we can also use it to help that go better. Because, when you do something the second time, it's a little bit easier. So now if we're expecting, okay, what I do now is going to have payoff in 10 years, and I'm going to try to do it the same way, now we've got a plan. We're not so thrown off guard. It doesn't feel like all of these ages are just random. They really do relate to each other. And so that's what I'm trying to do, is to get people to see that your threenager, fournado, and fiver is going to be your 13, 14, and 15-year-old, or really 12 to 15-year-old. And they're just going to be bigger, and they're not going to want to sit on your lap and let you hold them and say, it's okay, we're going to have these big feelings together. They're going to be like, I'm out of here.
Right.
So,
can you give me an example of how, whether it's a story from your own life or just a random example of how those, like, two situations that could be similar, of how they're affecting each other?
Threenagers, the little threes, if they want something, they really are very egocentric about wanting it and believing neurologically in their brain. They don't have their full frontal cortex online, so they don't have their rational thinking. So if I want it and then you say no, and I just can't wrap my head around that, I might have to lose it and, have a very strong, intense response to that. So anyone who's met a 3-year-old who doesn't get what they want when they really, really want it, like at the checkout counter in, the store, they just want it and believe it should be fine. And then if you've ever met a 13-year-old who really, really wants something like an iPod or designer sneakers, whatever, something, right, and believe deep down, that it is not it is a necessity.
Yes. Non-negotiable.
It is non-negotiable. They too can have that, storm off, slam the door, turn the music on in their room, and be just sort of not capable of having a rational conversation about it, because they can't get past at 3 or really early tween teens, which we're also going to talk about. They can't get past the part that I just want it.
The motivation for both of those ages are different. So what's potentially going on in the 13-year-old's brain that isn't allowing them to get to that same spot, even though they have more of their brain online than a 3-year-old?
They have more of their brain online, but it isn't all wired up yet into making those connections that experience helps us to make, and modeling and having interactions with our more mature brain. Let's take a 3-year-old brain and we say, oh, wow, I really know how badly you want that. I know it's so hard to not get what you want. I know you want it, but we can't have that right now or ever, whatever it is.
Yeah.
But at 13, I really know you want that. They've had a lot more experiences, about 10 years. And if we've been having conversations that are consistent and realistic and not highly overly emotional and, understand that we're the adult, we know the big picture. They don't necessarily know the big picture, and we're walking them down a path. I always like to use the word guide because, yes, we're parents, but what are parents? They are the guides. We're walking them from one stepping stone to the next. So now we have guided them down several more stepping stones. And at 13, they may really want something. Let's just use a cell phone because that seems so appropriate or something about a cell phone. They just can't connect how that want impacts you in any way. They just aren't there. They just see it from a very egocentric perspective, even though they're trying and their brain is starting to get there where they can start to see another person's perspective. It's almost like a glimpse. It's not, it comes online and then it disappears back into, it's like, surprise, I'm really mature and amazing. And then you go, wait a second, you just lost your mind. Like, who are you? So we see a lot of that in early teens because they're teeter-tottering between this very childhood. Their brain is literally rewiring for adulthood, and we're at the beginning stages now of the adult brain. Yeah. So that makes sense. That's the part is first go around, we're wiring for life. We're wiring for the cars to come online and experiences. Second rewiring comes in early adolescence, and now we're wiring for our adult brain and our deeper frontal cortex to come into play and our rational thinking. So we have two jobs.
So would you say at 3, you're building the highway, and then at 13, it's about getting the cars on the highway?
Actually, well, that was, we've pretty much built the highway by the time we're 3. 80% of our brain is the highway is constructed. Now we're putting the cars on it from 3 to 13 and the rest of our lives.
Okay.
So we hope that we've built a highway that makes sense,
Right.
That is a reasonable roadway. I guess what I would say at 13 is all of a sudden we're doing some reconstruction of the highway.
Okay.
And then we're going to bring on this new section of the highway called our frontal cortex or our reasoning brain. But it's not really built completely yet, and it's in the beginning phases, so we can't expect it to get us where we want to go immediately because it's going to take several years for it to really come online and fully solidify. For now, all of our adolescent and adult experiences to drive on those roadways that's now expanded.
Yeah, there's bound to be some traffic jams.
Traffic jams, yep. Some pile-ups, yep. So
awesome.
Yeah.
So what would you give tips for people with 3-year-olds? How do we parent them well?
So let's think about 3. So they've just moved away from toddlerhood. They're doing things that are different than our toddlers did. Now they actually are starting to look a little bit more, they're losing that pudgy face and they've got skinnier legs and they look a little more like a kid instead of a baby. Yeah. But really at the beginning of 3, they still only have, some children have more language. That's really a personal thing in a lot of ways, an experience. But they don't have a lot of words to communicate with at a front end of 3, like a young 3, maybe 500 words that they can expressively say, like, I need this, I want this, or I need help with this. So how 3-year-olds sort of come online and shift from being toddlers are that they're physically developing differently. Now they're not wobbly like a toddler anymore or a baby. They move, like they can run, literally. They're cruisers. They got a low center of gravity and they can totally move. They can climb. They can walk up and down stairs 1 foot at a time, which, if you think of a toddler or a baby, they can't. They have to do 1, 1, 1, 1.
Right. That's true. Yeah,
It's so interesting. But now at 3, they can do things. They do a lot more copying of adults. So you start to see the mannerisms of the parents and other adults in their environment. So you got to be more careful because toddlers are copiers too, but 3-year-olds are good at it. They can really pretend to be you. So you better be careful. If you've ever worked with a 3-year-old, and I used to, very early in my career, I worked with 3s, 4s, and 5s as a preschool teacher in an integrated classroom. I'll tell you, 3-year-olds hold nothing back. They will tell every single thing that happens that crosses their mind. So if you have a blemish on your face, they're like, "What's that on your face?" Or if my mommy and daddy were fighting so much that, my mom spit on my dad. They just, they don't think they have no ability to withhold, So privacy is not a thing. If you've been around a 3 or a 4-year-old, they love to run through the house naked. They don't care. They have no mind. Yeah. It's just a thing, and it's fine if that's a personal thing for a parent and they're not expecting that. It really is different than the grown-ups in the house running through the house naked, So especially if there's company over, people can run around their house naked if they live alone or with their partner, but if there are certain appropriate ways.
I'm getting mental images I don't want to be seeing right now.
I'm so sorry. I know I wasn't expecting us to go down that path, but I'm thinking about how many families have some cutesy pie name for their naked runner in their house. We had Nakey Boy. That was my biggest boy. Would just strip down, run through the house before he took a bath. That was just who he was at 4. But 3-year-olds, they're shifting out of this toddler phase and they're moving into this more social phase. Remember, we talked about toddlers being very contrary, no, me, mine. They're kind of angry about everything in the world. And now 3-year-olds...
I relate.
Yes. For sure. 3-year-olds aren't as... they're much more animated, happy. They have more language. They can communicate more. But they also have a high level of intensity still. So they can articulate their fury in ways that the toddler can't. The toddler cries and kicks and, throws a tantrum. Yeah. The 3-year-old cries, kicks, and tells you exactly how they feel about it. And
great.
They're very sensitive to routines, which are very helpful for parents. So when we are changing things up all the time, then that's difficult usually for a 3-year-old because it's confusing. Remember, we want the roadway to be specific. And sure, things change, but that can really throw off a 3-year-old. So using our words to explain what's happening to them. I think this is probably the biggest thing that parents and teachers and adults don't do with children. We think about what we're doing, but we don't communicate it. And I always say, whatever is going through your mind about what you're going to do with a child, you need to be saying that out loud in an appropriate way to the child so they know what you're thinking. Because that's so helpful. Even as adults, we don't do it with adults always either, but with children especially. Oh yeah, we were gonna drive through whatever. We were gonna go here, but I'm running out of time, and so we're not gonna do that now. We're gonna do something else, and we're gonna come back to that tomorrow. Or whatever. So
just basically trying to narrate your life.
You're pretty much
for your child.
Narrating your life. Exactly. As much as you can. And it's not easy, But at the same time, you're narrating it in your head anyway. So you might as well sort of filter it out, because it will make it easier for not only the child, but also for you. And remember, all those experiences are the cars on the highway. So when we attach language to the cars, it makes sense in our brain. So we don't have to have a big reaction to why somebody didn't come home when we were expecting it.
Right.
Parent has to work late. Other parent doesn't necessarily think, or grandparent, whoever is taking care of child, doesn't think to say, oh, this thing happened, it's really important, and it doesn't mean they don't care about you, but this is going to happen. Their routine is going to be shuffled, and there's a good reason. And I know your feelings are hurt about that, or you were so excited to show them your new picture. But it's okay, because we're still going to do that, but we're just going to do it in the morning. Now we've just shifted the whole thing, and they get to have their, process it.
Yeah.
It's a processing out loud.
Man, I'm just like hearing all these different things, that how much applies to adulthood as well.
Absolutely.
It's so helpful when someone communicates, hey, I'm not going to be able to do this thing. And I know that bums you out.
Yep.
And I still care about you, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, wow, this is so helpful. Yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the like, whoa of the universe is our earliest relationships set the stage for our adult relationships. So how you communicate and how we communicate with our children in their early years helps them then in their adult relationships later on, because they tend to imitate, copy, learn how to communicate similarly in their adult love relationships and attachments. So there's a much bigger reason for doing this at the front end, besides just it makes my life a little bit more convenient today. It actually helps them when they're an adult.
Yeah.
So, and those are things that get, tweaked and changed. It's not like set in stone, but at the same time, when we talk to children like that, then we hear them repeat the things we say. Oh, I think I told the story about the biting, and Joe said, Eli, we don't solve our problems with violence. Okay, so, right, exactly, we don't.
Yeah. So moving into 4-year-olds, what is the difference between a 3-year-old and a 4-year-old?
The difference between 3s and 4s, we think of it like, 4s are going to be so much easier. And in some ways, parents are often shocked, because 4s can actually be even more difficult than 3s, or they can be easier. So it's a little bit confusing. But okay, let's think about 4s. They're not that much different than 3s, except that now they have a lot more language and words. So a lot of words. They're even more skilled and mobile than they were at 3. Like, they're good at 3, but now, they're way better than they were at 2, but now they're really good at 4. And they're starting to have some ideas, but they still really have a lot of the same thinking patterns as a 3. They're just a little bit more experienced at it. So I like to say Threenagers and Fournadoes, because Threenagers are like sassy and difficult like a teenager, but man, a Fournado can come at you from nowhere, and you're like, who in the world are you? Like, the Exorcist showed up, and you're like, what? But they still need the same things. They still need that. I need you to tell me the reason, explain it. We need consistent routines, because consistency and predictability lead to stability. And that's what we want. And then, when we shift over, they do have a big desire to be part of the adult world. Like 3s and 4s, and especially 4s, and then even 5s, they really want to be friends with every adult. Like, they want their
Right,
best
right,
friends
right.
to be grown-ups. And they want to show you everything. And they are literally enamored by this thing called adulthood, you know? So if you think about it, when they come to show you their picture, when they show you what they built with Legos, or the fort they made outside, or the flower they picked, or whatever it is, we give them such a gift by letting them show us things and being excited at their excitement that this is new. Because for them, we've seen a flower a million times by the time we're whatever. For them, it's like, look what I found. This is so cool. And when we respond to that with excitement and joy, we give them a sense of they're important. And that's resilience. We're building their strength and resilience to be able to have that inner voice when nobody's there to admire whatever it is that they've created. They can do it within. So all babies, like, come into the world with some empathy. We don't necessarily call it that or recognize it or even think about it. But really, 3s, 4s, and 5s do have empathy for others. They can, in glimpses, say, oh, I'm so sorry that happened. I'm so sorry you fell down. Are you okay? You know, they do have empathy, and we need to jump on that. Because, like, oh, that was so nice of you to help your friend, you know, get up when she fell or whatever. So there's all these little tiny nuances that we do with 3s, 4s, and 5s that counter their whirlwind reaction to little tiny things that we think. I can't believe that losing one marble out of a pack of 80 could be the end of the world. You know?
Yeah.
Like, it's just this, you're living in drama. And it doesn't last forever. That's the beauty of it. Another thing that's important is that they're starting to get a lot more dexterity in their hands, so they're capable of doing a lot of things themselves, which is great. I'm still an advocate, and this is personal preference. I think littles are only going to be little for a short amount of time, really, in the grand scheme of life. So I'm a carrier, holder, lover, hugger. Let me help you with that if you want help. I'm not you need to do that all by yourself and be independent. Either one is fine. It doesn't matter. That's just because I'm a sappy, gushy hugger. So, you know, I carried my kiddos till they were, 4 or 5 years old if they needed it. And I still carry Charlie, and she's 6. If she wants me to,
Right.
I know she can walk. It's not going to interfere with her walking. So I don't need her to practice walking. So if I'm on board and she's on board, it's fine. That's personal preference. Giving them opportunities then to expand that development, dexterity, to expand their physical ability, climbing things, doing things, all good for, building their confidence. However, setting the limitations in really clear ways and expecting them to overstep, because remember, more like from almost a moral development standpoint or a cognitive development standpoint, this age group truly believes if I want it, it is right. So all the way from until early elementary, their philosophy of right and wrong literally is I should get my way. Okay, so that is really when you shift gears and think, oh my gosh, I'm talking to a person who sounds reasonable, but in their brain really believe I'm really just avoiding punishment and wanting rewards. That's really my life. Okay, you've just met a 3, 4, and a 5-year-old. These are your people. So you can love them to pieces, but know what you're operating with. You're operating with people who have the brain capacity of, I want it, I should have it, and love them for that. It's perfectly appropriate for them to be there. If they weren't there, we would be off track.
Yeah.
So that's the other thing is, really loving them for who they are and who they're supposed to be at that age. And it's, this is who I'm supposed to be. A very egocentric, me-oriented, punishment-reward-driven human. And I won't be like that forever unless we don't allow you to develop out of that stage. And the way we help kids develop out of that stage and keep moving forward is by using our words and explaining things and loving them and setting up the world in a predictable way. We don't have to make everything easy. We just have to make everything, possible. And if it's impossible, explain it. Why? Why is it not possible? That's the 3-4.
I think it makes a lot of sense just in my own interactions with my nieces and nephews is I forget that they're kids and that like explaining something, over-explaining something, saying, hey, I'm proud of you is not patronizing. Where if I said it to you, there's like some level of like, what? Right. So it's, remembering that, at least for me, it is difficult to kind of like get over that sort of mindset of, no, this is what they need, even though it sounds silly and dumb right now.
It does. And you know what? This is interesting too. This is a gender difference that for men and women, we use more words. Women use twice as many words to get the same point across, which is why we often, there are biases around that.
Sure.
However, it's also really necessary. So children actually listen to what men say longer and more intently because they say fewer words. And so children are like, and they crave that. They they want to hear what men have to say too. So on a really basic, just gender difference level, and children look to women for things they need, care, and things they need help with. But they look to men for play and engagement and roughhousing and, and you will often see a man pick up a little kid and jiggle him around and play boxing and do things like that. And you see women like, you're going to need a jacket. Let me make sure you have a snack. And it all sounds very gender stereotypical. Both genders can do both things, but recognizing that how important it is for children to have both of those experiences, regardless of gender, in their life helps them to be balanced. They can be playful and cared for at the same time.
Is it important to have two different people with those strategies, I guess we'll call it? Or can both of those things be found in one parent?
I think they can totally be found in one parent. I think that it's important for children to have parental models in their lives, whether they're really the biological parent or not. Adult models who do both of those things differently than maybe their main primary caregiver, just because we want them to have the experience of recognizing what that feels like with different people. And so being playful with one person only, then if you're playful with another person, you're like, wait a second, that's not what playful is. Like, I'm not used to that. That's not how Seth plays. You play wrong. They're going to say, you play wrong, Fournado.
Yeah.
So if Seth plays with you this way, but then a different uncle and a family friend and mom sometimes or whoever, lots of people play with you, play becomes broader. And care.
Interesting.
Care also becomes broader. You need a snack. I feel like you might be getting sleepy. Let's just take a little rest right now. And that can come from any gender and any loving, safe, caring adult. But the primary adults are primary. And their gender doesn't matter. It's their consistency and predictability that matters. Because they're the stage setters. And then we add adults in below them to reinforce those things. So it becomes like, oh, now I understand. We're making the roadway and the cars driving. We're setting the speed limit. We're setting the rules of the road. And it makes sense. Yeah. We have research on gender, but I think that the gender piece of that is really, it's not really about gender. It's just how it, that's just the roles that people have played in the past.
Could you maybe categorize it more in like masculine energy and feminine energy that can be contained in one person?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And so which one do you kind of lean towards on the spectrum?
Yeah. Absolutely.
What is more automatic?
Yes. What is more automatic? And then, we can also, as we're become aware of this, then we can say, oh yeah, I really want to play the playful role with my children a little bit more. Like I'm leaning way more heavily on my feminine energy than my masculine energy or vice versa. So sometimes I want to balance that out within myself, whether it's for myself or for my interactions with my children. So and then guess what? We can say everybody has some masculine and feminine energy in their bodies. You do too. You can know that.
Yeah.
And
what does yours look like?
Yeah, what does yours look like? And so then it gives them permission. It gives boys permission to cry, which is like a girl thing. It gives girls permission to be aggressive and fight and be, strong, which is quote a boy thing. And we're like, no, you can have both. It's okay. Yeah. That makes you a really nicely well-rounded person. We all cry and we all fight like hell sometimes. So,
exactly.
It's okay.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to fives.
Fives. Okay, so fivers. I like to call them fivers. Now they're they're moving into kindergarten-ish. In theory, they're much more comfortable with being, separating from their parents because they really have a good sense that if they have a family where parents always come back, they have an object permanence belief, and they are much more social. They care what you think a little bit more.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay.
They're not quite as cut and dry like, what, you don't think what I think, and then I'm over you. They care what their friends think, and they care what other people think, and they're starting to move into the zone of the world is a social place, and I can have some power in that. And so our next topic is going to be around bullying, and this is where we really start to see pretty sophisticated and yet immature bullying start is around 5-6 years old. And that's because of the social capability, awareness, and communication that now fives are moving into. They have a lot of words. They have a lot of things they are able to talk about and able to receive as information. Much more than a 3-year-old did. So now they can start, but remember, they still live in the world of punishment and reward.
Wow.
They have not grown out of that yet. So even though they might be showing slight microscopic glimpses of the next phase, which is I really should do as I'm told because that's what my parents want and my teacher wants, and they want to do what they're supposed to do, they still can slip. If they've been bullied as a child or abused or not treated well or all of those things, remember, their maturity level is going to be lower, so that's how we find bullying in fives. They're wanting to shift, though, and they're starting to shift into this, good people do what they're told by their parents or do what they're told by adults. So then we also say, if my 5 and 6-year-old thinks being a good person is doing what they're told by adults, maybe I should be really careful what adults are around my child, right?
Yeah.
Because if a stranger adult comes around your child and says, I'm an adult, you need to do what I say, and it's something inappropriate, they don't have the capacity to understand that. So it's time where you say out loud, it's really important to, do what adults tell you to do, but not all adults. If you feel like it's something you don't want to do and adult tells you to do it, then you need to come to me and tell me and ask me what I think. Or you don't need to do that. You are allowed to say no, and you're allowed to, whatever. So we think stranger danger, every bad person in the world is, this scary looking person in an alley. And pretty much most people are not that. They live in the house or they live on in the neighborhood, and they're, most abusive interactions with young children happen within families. So, but that's partly because we haven't tackled having these difficult conversations and protecting children and just believing that everybody is, fine and safe.
Maybe this is a completely separate episode to have sometime, but like having those types of conversations, really uncomfortable, really, how do you explain to a child in that way that helps them differentiate between going and grabbing your coat when you don't want to, and participating in something that you actually don't want to do.
We could definitely do an episode on that. There's so many phases of that conversation, but I will say that 5 is a really good time to start. 4 and 5 are really good times to start having those conversations because, one, it starts them off with the concept of trust your body. Trust your own body. If your body and your brain are kind of in like saying, I don't really like this, if it's, playing a certain game, like, I don't know, I don't like running the mile, my body thinks that that's not my favorite thing to do. But if it's somebody trying to convince you to do something that you don't want to do, and children are all of a sudden very aware for the first time that girl parts and boy parts are different, and that there's all this, different things between girls and boys and gender differences. I have a personal bias in this department, and it really is that we put way too much on little kids to manage their safety in this area. Because even if we tell them it's not okay for anybody, even someone you love, if somebody that they love really comes to them with a request that's super inappropriate, or just does something to them that's super inappropriate with a threat behind it, there's no way a child has the capacity to manage that. And it just sets the stage for it's your responsibility to protect yourself. And that's not the case with littles.
Yeah.
So we just have to be so diligent, because we know this is such a, number one, it's highly prevalent. It's like 30% of the population has been sexually molested or assaulted. That's an insane number.
Insane.
It is an insane number. So we have to get past that. It wouldn't be my uncle or my grandfather or my father or my neighbor or my friend. We have to get past that and say, okay, it really probably could be. We hope it's not, but it really probably could be. That's what I say to parents is, you need to name the people. As difficult and as terrible as that sounds, like I say to, my Charlie, she's 6. Eli, my youngest son, Uncle Lili, he loves you so much, and I don't think he would ever do anything like this. But if even somebody like Lili touched you in a way that made you feel uncomfortable, you have to tell your mama. Or if someone else, whatever, like we have to name the names. And then even Eli can say to her, like, I would never do this. And if somebody else, who you love and care about are worried, so she knows that all the people around her have said it, not just her mom, but even Lila's on board, and even BB, me, her grandma's on board, and Lisa's on board.
Yeah.
We're all on board. So if some person that we all love does do something, then she knows that we've all said, oh yeah, that's not okay. And it could happen.
So would you say 5 is the time to begin to help them understand, help them draw their own boundaries, and to give them a sense of empowerment? What I'm sensing between from 3 to 5 is this increasing awareness that I'm affected by the world and I can affect the world.
Yeah.
And when there is not some level of structure and way to delineate what to do when, then that's when things can just go haywire and cause some significant damage.
Yeah, exactly. And being allowed to have some self-efficacy at 5, because the other thing that 5s have that's different for 5s than 3s is the level of supervision. We let 5-year-olds go off and play with people. Play in their, whatever. They're not under our nose like a 3-year-old is. Constantly. Yes, recognize those boundaries and their ownership of their own body, and deciding who they want to hug, who they want to kiss, who they want to, not even be around. These are all things that are super appropriate. Now, the part that can be hard is that parents struggle with this. They're what do you mean you don't want to be around grandpa or grandma or somebody? Now it becomes a bigger family situation. But this is how we change. This is what we know, and how we need to make alterations in the way we process ourselves through parenting. And we've learned things we know now. And the other thing that people will say, is, oh, you're spoiling them. You're letting them run the show. You're letting them be in charge. Well, yeah, kind of, because I invited them into the world to be in charge of their own life. And my job is to guide them to be good at being in charge of their life. That doesn't start when you turn 18. That starts the day you're born. So we have to put up with them being terrible at being in charge of their life at the beginning. And then slowly but surely, we're helping them get better and better at being in charge of their lives. And they still may not do it the way we want to, but it's their life. And that's where people struggle with, I own you as a parent. No, you really don't. And that's a shift for people sometimes. A lot of the time. And it's a real shift for older generations who are used to don't pick up the baby because you'll spoil them. The biggest lie of the universe. Absolutely pick up the baby if they're crying. Pick up the baby just because you love the baby. You're not going to spoil the baby. That's not a thing. So
it's not a thing.
Not a thing. Said by Dr. B, will fight to the death over that comment with anybody.
Yes.
No.
Yeah.
Pick the damn baby up.
Do it now.
So do it
if you
now.
see a baby, just pick it up.
Just pick it up and kiss and love on that baby. So.
Yep. I can kind of hear the voices of many parents just being like, oh my goodness, how do I navigate these 3, 4s, and 5s? I'm sure we'll be doing more episodes on parenting and whatnot that will help answer some of these questions. But where would you point them? Resources for how to parent such a difficult age of learning how to be their own person while not allowing them to
run the show.
Run the show. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, that's a phrase that parents could tape to the wall, Be the guide, but don't let them run the show. I like to think of it like a circle. And you have the child within the circle. They have all the freedom they need within the circle that's age appropriate for them. But as soon as they hit the boundary line, that's where you come in and you say, yeah, that you're not ready for that. That's my job.
Yeah.
And so the circle slowly gets bigger and bigger, and we have lots of concentric circles and let that happen. But for parents, this is what I want to say. You're a good enough parent. If you're worrying about this, you are an awesome parent already. And your children are meant to drive you a little bit crazy, and that's okay. That does not make you a bad parent. So you're doing fine. Just learning this sort of way of thinking is transformative to parenting. And so you can't really mess it up just by the sheer fact that you care enough to try to understand how to do it. Nobody's going to do it the same. Nobody's going to do it perfectly. We're all going to lose our mind a little bit here and there. It's fine. We don't have to be perfect. I'm just giving you the intricate details. I didn't raise my children like that. I didn't even know that until my kids were older. So I'm backtracking and saying, oh yeah, okay, so sorry I did that. And they're fine people. So, we don't have to be perfect. But now we know things and we can do better, and it'll make us feel better because we know these things. Thanks so much for listening to today's episode. I appreciate the opportunity to connect with you. If you're interested in booking a training, I'd love to hear from you. You can reach me at my website, Dr. B Connections. There's a big button that says, book a training with Dr. B. It's that easy. If this show has been beneficial for you, please share it with your friends and family. Spreading the word about the show helps us grow our audience and helps continue to change the world together. Again, thanks so much for listening to Delusional Optimism. Now, go leave a life print.
Thank you for listening to this special episode of Delusional Optimism, brought to you by St. Agnes Medical Center and Every Neighborhood Partnership. We hope you're encouraged by Dr. B's message and find her tips helpful for managing life's stressors and building a more resilient self. For more episodes in this special series, please visit St. Agnes Medical Center's website at www.samc.com. This episode is produced and published by the editing team at Truthwork Media. Truthwork Media is a full-fledged podcasting and social media agency located in South Bend, Indiana, with clients all around the world. For more information, visit them at truthworkmedia.com. These materials and all discussions of these materials are for educational purposes only and do not constitute medical or mental health advice. The presenter is not a licensed mental health or medical service provider. If you need medical or mental health care or advice, you should contact your doctor or therapist, or you can contact your insurance company for a referral. This show and all of its contents are copyright 2020 Dr. B Leave a Life print. Reproduction or use requires written consent of Dr. Kristen Beasley.